So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for our session on the power of leading restoratively without the fear of the dragon. And hopefully the connection will become clear as we go. I am going to show a short video, and apologies if you can't see it. Some guests may be able to see it, some may not. It's only a minute or so, and obviously if you can't see it, just bear with us, and we will send out the PowerPoint.
There were dragons when I was a boy. Oh, there were great, grim sky dragons that nested on the cliff tops like gigantic, scary birds. Little brown scuttly dragons that hunted down the mice and rats in well-organized packs. Preposterously huge sea dragons that were 20 times as big as the big blue whale. Some say they crawled back into the sea, leaving not a bone nor a fang for men to remember them by. Others say they were nothing but folktales to begin with. I'm okay with that. Hey there, bud. Remember me?
It's okay.
Hey, I am glad to see you too, bud.
He's not gonna eat your father.
How's the tail holding up? I'll give you some oil and a little fine-tuning.
Look, it's okay. They're friends.
Here,
Go on. It's all right.
come. He won't hurt you. Hold your hands out. Like this. That's it. Let him come to you. Legend says that when the ground quakes or lava spews from the earth, it's the dragons, letting us know they're still here, waiting for us to figure out how to get along. Yes, the world believes the dragons are gone, if they ever existed at all. But we Burkians, we know otherwise. And we'll guard the secret until the time comes when dragons can return in peace.
So apologies to some that couldn't hear, couldn't see the video. There was a little bit of a worry about that, but we will send it out. We wanted to just give it a go anyway. So I'm sure even if you didn't have sound, you could get the feeling from the pictures that were coming through. So I'll hand over to Yvette.
So thank you very much. We're going to talk a little bit more about that video and the dragons next. But what we wanted to provide for you to begin with is a little bit of context. So I work at Iffley School in Oxford. My name's Yvette Fay, and I'm deputy head at Iffley. So you have a little bit of information about our school. We've got 176 students and we're a secondary school. We're based near Oxford, near the city centre, but we take students from across the county. And our students have moderate learning and cognition needs, autistic spectrum disorder, and social, emotional, mental health needs. Our cohort of learners has really changed over the last 5 years. We've been a restorative school for 15 plus years, and we've worked as a restorative school within the different needs of our cohort and our students. We gained the Restorative Justice Council mark in 2018, and we were the first SEND school in the county to achieve this. And we've recently moved into a brand new building, which has also had a massive impact on the school community. And we just thought it was really important to talk about context, because context is important to everyone's understanding. As a leader and when working restoratively, context is really important to building relationships, understanding different perceptions, and also when you're working with children who are ACEs, who have ACEs, understanding the context is also important. So we just wanted to start with this. Chantal.
Thank you. So I'm Chantal Yates and I'm currently working at Belmont School in Cheltenham, and it was fascinating to visit Yvette's school a couple of years ago and see how similar they are. And we were very excited to work together because what we're doing in different counties is so similar for the children. So our school has got 157 pupils from 6 to 16. We also have moderate learning difficulties and cognition needs, a lot of autistic children, about 33%, and many children with social, emotional, mental health. But we've actually relabeled many of our children as having complex needs, which means they've got 3 or more different needs in different areas. We've got just over 70 staff, 20 of those are teachers, 30 LSWs or learning support workers, 5 learning mentors, which is part of our inclusion or interventions team, and we've got 8 HLTAs and our admin staff as well. So a very, very big staff to support the complex needs of our children. We've got 5 classes in primary and 11 in secondary, and the class sizes are no more than 12, usually with 1 learning support worker or possibly 2, depending on the needs of the children. We've got a fantastic interventions team that has made sure that all of this work can take place every single day, because it's not always possible for the teachers to allow that time to work with our most complex pupils. Sometimes we need the interventions team to step in and help us in the relational work that we do. So we fly our flag as being a relational school, which means we are ACE aware, trauma informed, and we practice restoratively. So why restorative at an ACE conference? Hopefully it's come through all morning with all of the different presentations that you've watched. Even though we are a restorative school, you have to have all 3 of those concepts. You have to be ACE aware, you have to have trauma-informed practice and restorative practice when conflict occurs. And Bessel van der Kolk has written a brilliant book, and the title is The Body Keeps the Score, and that's exactly what we have to understand. When we're working with the adults in our organizations and the children in our care, we have to understand that we've all got brains that have held or kept the score of trauma or experiences that have happened to us in the past. And this is a diagram from Dr. Bruce Perry, who's outstanding in this field, and he looks at the brain in its upside down triangle model, where the bottom part of the brain is what gets developed very, very early on in childhood development, and those systems are very often not controlled consciously at all. So you've got things like blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, those different systems that happen in our brain all day, every day. We can't control them. But as you move up, the brain becomes much more complicated and complex, and we have some control over things that we experience. So for instance, in the cortex, which is the outer part of the brain, which is actually developed last in the development of the brain, this controls abstract thoughts, concrete thoughts, helps us with attachment. So as our brain develops, it actually develops from the inside out, and the outer layer of the brain is the most complex. Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey have just released a book that's entitled What Happened to You, which is fantastic. I'm loving listening it to on the audio, although I am an avid reader. Listening to it and hearing Oprah's voice and Dr. Bruce Perry's voice is fantastic. And that's the trauma-informed approach that we need. Not what's wrong with you, what's happened to you? How has your brain developed that is showing us behavior that we see? We have to understand ourselves. And although we, Yvette now and my team, we work in a school, we work with children, a lot of our work has happened over the past 7 years with ourselves and with our staff, with the adults. We need to understand ourselves, our past, our own emotions, our responses, our thoughts, and our reactions. And if we are in control of all of those things, we can help the children understand themselves, their emotions, their responses. So a lot of this leadership work needs to take place with the adults and then with the children. And we constantly recognize what's going on. We retrain our staff and ourselves to support the children. And often we have to reprogram our own brains in order to understand how we can help our most vulnerable children, the ones that have experienced ACEs.
Fantastic. So we also wanted to talk a little bit more about leadership, because the conference is the focus of our workshop is about restorative leadership. So the whole presentation is structured using Simon Sinek's approach, and some of you may be aware of him already, but he's a leadership expert and he has developed a theory called the Golden Circle. And at the end of this presentation, we've got a link to one of his TED Talks, just as a taster for more information in this. But his approach is very much about building relationships, working with people, and working alongside people. And Chantel just said about the approach of asking students why and supporting them, not just directing them when they're impacted by ACEs. And this approach as a leader links to that and is a tool to add to your toolbox that you can use as a leader to develop a restorative approach, to develop an ACEs aware approach. So Simon Sinek, his leadership approach starts with 3 simple concepts. And he says lots of very successful people in leadership start with why, but most people think you should start with what. So he talks about starting with the why, and the why is a purpose, cause, or belief. And he talks about once you've got people involved and engaged and committed to that why, then you can make a change, then you can move a culture. He then moves on to focusing on the how, and the how is things that make you special or set you apart. And the what is actually what you do, the service you offer, whereas most people tend to start with this is what we do. So we've structured our whole presentation using this structure, and it's just something else that you can take away with you. A small tool that links to a restorative approach is about leadership, but is about a change in mindset. So this theory is about leading through cooperation and trust, which clearly links to a restorative approach. And also when we're talking about restorative leadership, it's more than a leadership style, it's a mindset. So I'm sure you've talked before and looked at transformative leading, emotive leading, etc. But this is an umbrella term that incorporates all those, and it's a mindset, because you're constantly engaging with the why, and using this leadership structure can contain your dragon and other dragons, because it's taking away the fear, it's making links and relationships with people, which takes away the fear. In some ways, you have to be brave to do that. And I've got a quote there by Brené Brown, and she talks about staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. And it is a risk for some leaders to be vulnerable and to work alongside others and show that connection. But actually also it's really powerful. So we just wanted to talk a little bit more about the dragon metaphor itself. So we've provided a little bit of context about our schools. We've talked about how restorative links to ACEs. We've talked about that leadership approach of Sinek. And we then just wanted to talk a little bit about our dragon metaphor. So it is a paradox. As a leader, there may be a perception or feeling that you have to be an excellent leader, you have to be fierce and tough and breathe fire, or at least these elements need to be in your repertoire or armor. But this thought or belief may come from external sources and pressures, or it may come from your internal dialogue. But we all know in leadership that there's a high kind of exhaustion and burnout rate, but it can be exhausting having to put on that mask, having to put on that perception. And I suppose in some ways, Chantel and I are here to show you that it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to put on that mask. And actually to be a leader restoratively can be very liberating, and you're facing your own dragon, because by facing your feelings and emotions, you can then support others and lead without that mask. So we use the idea of the dragon because that might be the perception of a leader, but actually, like the dragon in the video, you don't need to be like that. You can be friendly, you can build the relationship, you can work with other people. So as a restorative leadership approach supports and encourages you to face and understand your hidden dragon, and in turn work with others to understand their hidden dragons. Because I think within all of us, there's that fear or that need or hiding. So by facing and engaging with your hidden dragon, you are able to successfully lead cultural change, move a whole ethos forward, develop meaningful relationships and understanding, and develop inclusive and consultative strategy. And I've put without having to breathe fire. It doesn't have to be fierce. And that vulnerability that Brené Brown talks about links to that. Chantel, was there anything you think to add to that?
No, I've just clicked over because I think the key words are the vulnerability, and you're absolutely right. The fear, you have to be brave in this work. You have got armor, you will have your masks, and you will have to put that armor down in order to form these very, very strong relationships and tackle some of these emotive concepts. So some of the key words that were bounced in our head, you have to have courage, you have to have your own resilience, you have to listen and observe. You've got to be honest, and that comes with the vulnerability. And there will be pressure, external, internal, all sorts of pressure, and there will be emotions because we are human beings, your own emotions and emotions of your staff and your pupils around you. So it's not an easy journey at all, but the rewards, the ultimate rewards, are incredible.
And I think, as you're saying as well with that, when you're working restoratively and supporting people affected by ACEs, it's not a one-fit-all kind of approach, which again encourages you or needs you to be brave, because by having that approach, there's this constant dialogue of trying to understand, of empathy, of building relationships to support. So we just wanted to speak a little bit about our dragon and taming it. So as we move to the next part of the slides, we're going to be starting with the why, which is the Cynic approach, and engaging with you with that. And we're linking each part of Cynic's approach to part of the dragon. So we feel that the belly is the why, because you often feel your purpose or your belief in your belly. You can't kind of say it, but you feel it. You know it's there, and I've put, but do you communicate this clearly? And that's where that brave nature comes in. To actually communicate what you're feeling in your belly is a brave step. And as a restorative leader, you need to look inwards and face your why before facing outwards. And you then need to engage with others and understand their why. We're then going to look at the how, which is the second part of Cynic's approach, and how we can achieve this. And I know this is kind of a whistle-stop tour because we've got limited time, but hopefully we're giving you the highlights. The how we've linked to the fire and the breath of the dragon. Because fire can be scary and intimidating, but removing your mask as a leader can also feel like this. As a restorative leader, you are thinking about the needs of each person, working with the others and forming a cohesive pathway forwards. And then the third part is the what. And we've thought about those and thought that they're like the spikes of the dragon, because that aspect can be also up and down. There can be positives and negatives, and it needs to take that emotions and your vulnerability and your taking your mask and your armor off to be able to work through those spikes. Because what we're saying is restorative leadership is a mindset. We're not saying it's more work, we're saying it's different work. And with that comes more challenges as well. But we feel it has a significant impact on the outcome for students, and also the outcomes for staff and retaining staff within your environment.
Thank you, Yvette, and thank you to Roz. I know that we need to slow down and show you every single bit of the slide. Yvette and I could talk for days on this topic, and it was really hard for us to narrow it down, but we've only got sort of 15 more minutes. So we're going to just give you a taster, and then I will give you both of our email addresses where you can contact us and have deeper conversations. So thank you for that. So the belly of the dragon, and this is where the passion lies for us, because it's that gut feel, it's that instinct, it's the emotion, it's the trauma, it's the feelings, it's the understanding of ACEs. And if you're new to this world, it can like blow your mind when you actually start to think about everything it entails. There's two parts to it, as a leader and as students. And I'm going to say again, as leaders, we have to focus on the adults that we're working with, because when we talk about ACEs, we have to think about our own ACEs and what happened to us, and understanding our emotions, our instincts, and our own trauma. And if we are able to understand that, then we will be more able to work with people around us. So we have to model the behavior that we want to see, especially in our schools with our special needs children. We have to have the courage to want to do this, and we have to be both brave and afraid. We do a lot of co-regulation in our schools because our children don't know their emotions. They can't identify their emotions. They can't respond appropriately to these emotions. And it comes out as behavior, very often negative behavior. So we do a lot of co-regulation with them until the hope is that they will be able to self-regulate ultimately, and then continue through the transition to the next stage in life. So the behavior that we see from our children shows us an unmet need. It's a form of communication. And a lot of work around what we do is the relational language that we use. That is not naughty behavior. It's not misbehavior. It's an unmet need that they are telling us something. Again, what happened to you? And the trauma-informed approach is to be curious, to take the time to listen, to observe, to think about the pupils in your care, to help them understand themselves, their brains and their behavior. If you don't get this right, you will not be able to teach them phonics and maths and everything else on the curriculum. They have to be at a place to learn, and this is where it all begins.
So we're going to talk also a little bit about the how. So that was the second part of Sinek's approach. And we're talking about the breath of the dragon. So we're talking about communication, restorative language, ethos, vibe, and way of being. Communication in restorative is really important because we're asking questions. We're not making assumptions. We're proactively listening and hearing the student. And also, we are using this approach with other staff as well. So it is a way of being, it is a whole school ethos. And with restorative language, we're asking open questions. So there's no assumptions or there's no blame. It's about a no blame culture. And also, if you're thinking about working with young people that have been affected by ACEs due to that impact and their previous experiences, as Chantel was just saying, you could then have a great impact on that person because of their previous experiences. So having that no blame culture and the language to support that is really important so that you can build that relationship. Because once that child can touch both walls, once they can feel safe, once they know their boundaries and where they are and their relationships, then they can thrive, then they can excel, then they can access their education. So when we're talking about the students in how, we're talking about embedding systems to build and understand emotions so that they can problem solve, encourage positive communication without blame. And so some of the things we do is we have Mendit meetings. So these are meetings where you are sat in a circle because it's not about blame or one person being in charge. And we go through a process where we ask open questions to understand. We use the positive language. And we use a with approach with the students. So I'm sure, I've not been to Chantel's school, but I'm sure if you go to Chantel's school as well as ours, yes, there is the role of the teacher, but there's clear relationships because you're working with. It's not a hierarchical structure. And we develop this within the classroom. And we complete things such as a family service lunch. So a member of staff sits with the class and has lunch together. So it's about building relationships and having time together. We have lots of circle times in class where there's activities where everyone is one and working together. Again, there's no hierarchy in a circle. And we have regular check-ins and check-outs with the students. So we're building that emotional literacy. We're helping them understand emotions and how to then regulate them as well. And when we're talking about that check-in and check-out, that is not just for students, that's for staff as well. So the staff and students sit in a circle together. And this may sound simple, but it's really powerful. And they talk about their emotions so that they can move on. And as our students go through that school, the check-in may be quicker, but because students can use that system to self-regulate, then they can access more learning. So that's a little bit how the students and the how. In terms of leadership, in our school, we have things such as the office structure. So we have a leadership area, but we don't have a headship or a head teacher office. So there is a hierarchy in that the head ultimately is paid for that role and needs to make final decisions, but we work as a team. and the environment and our structure of our school support that, in that we work together and we don't just have one office for the head teacher. Our policies focus on the how as well, because we don't have an exclusion policy, because we believe what message are we giving the student, how are we building relationships, how are we supporting them if we remove them from the school. And that's something really powerful, and something some of the students really struggle with when they arrive. I've had students who have been very difficult, thrown things, been quite verbally aggressive, maybe a physical management, and shouting at me, how do I get out of this school? You know, what do I do to be excluded? And I go, oh, no. Once you're in for life. We're all here. There is no, you know, we're going to work on this. We're going to get through this. We're going to support you. We're going to work together. And that, again, is something really powerful. We have lots of meetings and CPD across the school to support the how and reinforce. We use lots of inquiry-based questions. I can't think of a time when I go into a meeting and provide the answer. And again, that's a mindset change. It's sometimes difficult because as a leader, you think you might have to provide the answers. But again, that's about working with other people. And also as a leadership, we have circle times, we have regular check-ins and check-outs. Did you want to add anything else there?
No, a lot of it's the same on our side of the boundary of the counties. So we've taken a couple of pictures just to show you some of the areas around our schools. These are Yvette's from Yvette's school, and the rest I'll show you ours in a second. But restorative approach is just happening all the time. It's a way of being. It's what we do. Checking in is what we do. Checking in with each other, checking with our pupils. And there's various ways that we can do this. Both of us use zones of regulation, but there are lots and lots of different creative ways that you can check in with one another. We also have a lot of areas in our school for just regulation, for getting the children to a safe place where they can calm down and start to get their brain functioning to a state where they can actually use their cortex, their thinking brain, to understand what's going on in their bodies. So just a few things, and I'm conscious that not everyone's from a school setting, but a few things that you can do for both your staff and for your pupils. I firmly believe that no matter what organization you're in, that the staff should have a place where they can calm down and get support to regulate themselves when they are dysregulated. Yvette?
Yeah, so the final aspect of Cynic's approach is the what, and hopefully this is kind of the easier aspect, or it just happens because it's your why and your first aspect that's the really hard work to embed and to develop that culture. But by the time you get to the what, it should be more natural. However, there are spikes within this. There are challenges. There are peaks and troughs, like the spikes of a dragon, because we're all slightly different, because it isn't a one-stop-fits-all kind of approach. So how, or the what we achieve, is we support, we teach, we coach, and we champion students to be emotionally resilient, to recognise their own needs, to be able to problem solve and build meaningful relationships. And the idea is we're reducing the impact of the ACEs because we're teaching skills for the students to be able to cope with the impact of the ACEs, because they're learning to self-regulate, they're learning to problem solve through this approach. And because it's a way of being, it's constant, it's all the time, so it's so embedded into your system. And then as a leadership, how we achieve the what is it's constantly embodied in the whole school, and we review and evaluate a restorative mindset to support student development and build a cohesive, reflective and emotionally resilient staff.
Thank you, and that leads us on to our leadership challenges and the change curve, because if you take on this approach, you will be changing culture. You will be changing perceptions of human adults, and that takes a very, very long time to do. You will go through a period where people will want more information, and then they will support, and then they won't want to change, and then there will be barriers that will be put up in front of you, and then they'll need more direction and more encouragement for the change that they're experiencing. And this is typical model that we've learned in the last 7 years and seen with our own staff as we've made these huge culture changes within our school. There will be personal challenges for leaders. You'll have to face your own ACEs, your own barriers, your resistance from staff and from parents and sometimes pupils. This is a whole different way of approaching, and it's very, very different for many of us because the schools we were in and how we grew up is not the same as the schools that we hope to run today and the way the children are growing up. So it doesn't feel right. It feels uncomfortable, and that's what makes us vulnerable. You're going to have to manage that change in the culture and go slowly. Make sure that your staff are on board and that you explain the why. Simon Sinek, the why. They have to understand why are we doing this? Because if they don't know why, then they won't want to buy in. And the more success stories that you share with them, the more they'll want to buy in and have a part of this experience and become better for themselves and the people around them. So they have to buy in. There has to be consistency. You will relapse. Personally, you will relapse. And as a school, you will relapse and you will default to punishment. And it even takes me a while to say the word punishment. I don't even like saying it anymore. And detentions. And you will relapse because you get tired and you get emotional and the children push your buttons and the staff push your buttons. You will relapse. You will have to reassess. You may have to retrain yourself and some of your staff. And then, of course, you've got new staff joining your organization. So it's a constant process, a journey of change and developing and becoming better and evaluating. And you slowly but surely, the little ball that you begin rolling becomes bigger and bigger as your team becomes stronger and stronger and you all understand the why. Yvette, did you want to add anything else there before we move on?
I think the only example I think of as well, because I worry sometimes we've not contained it enough. I sometimes say that restorative is like trying to catch water and to remold it because it's ongoing, it's a challenge. But I worked in mainstream secondary, I was a deputy head of year, and I had 20, 30 children every day in lunchtime detention. I didn't know why they were there. Sometimes they didn't know why they were there, but the focus was they had to be silent. However, in a restorative school, we wouldn't have even got to that point because I would have had a meeting with them. We would have talked about the why. I would have understood the problem. And although that may take a little bit more time, it develops a greater understanding for you and for the student because they therefore understand the why and hopefully therefore will not use the same behaviour again or change the behaviour or be supported to change the behaviour, which has a far more successful outcome.
Thank you. So where to next? Those are our email addresses. The PowerPoint will most certainly be shared with you. No problem with that at all. We will put it onto the ACES conference website as resources. Please feel free to contact us, give us a call if you want to chat about anything. If you're very, very new on this journey, then of course your mind is going to be full of all sorts of things and you need to work out what's the best start and where you can actually go on this journey. We're happy to share our stories with you and give you some advice. So please feel free to contact us. We have put a couple of ideas down for and reading further with any books. These are some of our favorites that we've used. Brené Brown, we've mentioned Dare to Lead if you are in that leadership position is absolutely brilliant. And there's a few others there that we've kind of used along the way and we think are our Bibles almost and help us to create what we have created in our schools with our teams. So that's the end of our presentation. We have got a couple of minutes and Yvette and I will stay on if anybody does want to ask any questions or chat to us. More than happy for you to put them in the chat box if you've got any specific questions. But I believe that Phil can unmute you as well if you'd like to talk to us directly. So I will stop presenting and hopefully...
Just to say as well, Chantal, our emails are up there, but I think visiting the schools, I know with COVID at the moment that might be restricted or difficult, but I think you understand more and feel more and see more when you're in the environment and then you can talk through the examples. Oh, Maxine Fox would like to ask a question.
Brilliant, thank you. You know, everything you're saying is brilliant and I would absolutely love to come and visit your school. I don't live anywhere near your area, but Inga used to work with me down in Salisbury, hence I'm on your conference today. I've been doing restorative practices for a long, long time in schools, but a question I want to ask is how do you combat those resistant staff?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Yes, such a good question. And Yvette can chip in as well. We certainly have had resistant staff, certainly in the beginning, that wanted to revert back to all of the old ways. How you combat them is by having those conversations. You talk through, you get to understand where is their behavior coming from, what barriers are there for them, and you try and work through and help them understand that this is a completely different approach. And then you share small examples of success with them, and you model as well. As much as possible, I model with my staff so they can see what's happening and how they can actually do this restorative work. And slowly but surely, if they choose to work this way, they will remain in your school. But obviously we have to respect people that they may choose not to work in our schools. But we definitely have a lot of people wanting to work in our schools now, which is fantastic for us because of the whole approach that we've got. Yvette?
And I would say involving staff in seeing the outcome of the process and seeing the positivity, and also then engaging them in a circle time. So like you were saying, talking, but the actual partaking in a circle time is really powerful when you're there. And I'm not saying it's easy or an overnight fix, but as you're saying, you know, they may not decide it's for them and choose to opt out. However, I find generally we have a slow staff turnover, particularly in our teachers. So I think partly that has an impact as well. There was a question on here as well, Chantel. It says, are the local authorities supportive of a non-exclusion policy? Do you have issues with parents accepting this approach? So should I do my tongue and I can't think of the saying approach. The LA love it because they haven't got to redistribute the children anywhere else. But they're very supportive of the system. And we do have some issues with parents, not in that they want us to exclude the children, but in understanding restorative and the process. But we find it's really key from the very beginning. Our information that goes out to kind of our transition, we talk about those systems there with parents to start their understanding. And also talking to the students about it as well is key.
I tend to agree as well. Our local authority is really working hard with all schools not to exclude, so they definitely will support us. And parents have to also learn, so we have to have those conversations with parents and help them understand this completely different approach to what they may have been used to in education. Just looking at the time, conscious of the time, so thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon. Look out for the presentation. You've got our email addresses on that presentation, and we'd be more than willing to chat to you. And even if you are far away, there are ways and means of being in touch and sharing some more of the information about our schools. So thank you very much.